I just want to ask you about Matt Rule. Get to him first. Was it your view that Nebraska, bottom line, needed a program builder, somebody that had basically shown an ability, kind of a start from scratch coach, basically a coach that's shown that he can take a program from the lowest of lows? In your view, is that where Nebraska is at right now?
Not in that division. They're not at the lowest of lows. They're losing games by one score. And they continued that trend for the most part last year. It wasn't nearly as ironic or on script as it was the year before, where it was just a weekly basis. But I don't think that they're in that division, and this is only most likely going to last for one season. Are they far away from the top? They could ascend from where they're sitting at 4 wins and win the division championship this year. I wouldn't not be surprised by that. I don't think it's likely, but they're not playing on a different level than the Big Ten West is not the Big Ten East when it comes to levels of play, and they're within striking distance of whoever was the better team going through even the Scott Frost era. They were within striking distance. They were playing competitive games every week against those teams. And I'm really intrigued beyond of the overall Matt Rule impact this first year, because his impact on the other two stops his first year was significant.
Hmm.
And then another step was taken the next season, the second season. But this quarterback battle between Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson, because it was my thought that Casey Thompson was a better quarterback than Adrian Martinez.
Mm.
I think it's debatable, but that was my thought coming into last season. Now, Adrian Martinez may have just been more of a turnover machine at inopportune times,
Yeah,
but he's
big
certainly
time.
not Casey Thompson, not the quarterback threat running that Adrian Martinez is. And now I thought he had that job locked in, that he was the guy, but they brought in Jeff Sims from Georgia Tech. And our guy, Zach Smith, really likes what he's seen out of Jeff Sims, but also has coaching buddies that say that he's the better quarterback and he's going to win the job.
Well, I just want to say about the previous regime, the Frost era. I did think that Scott Frost kind of built up the recruiting there. I mean, it seemed like, obviously, at least in the recruiting rankings, they were doing fairly well his few years there, at least well enough to where they should be winning more games than he won. And I guess that leads me to my point, Mark, because we always talk about both aspects of coaching. Where we talk about coaches that can get some talent, or at least get talent in there to where they should be winning some games. At the very least, they should have been on that side of the division, as you talked about, with his, not as strong as it is. Winning at least 7, 8 games, maybe 9 games, getting to bowl games with the type of recruiting that he was doing. At least he was recruiting. It seemed like a high enough level to do that. My point was, and I guess this kind of reared its head, I saw it in that first game of last year against Northwestern. Do you think it was all about his in-game coaching? Or you mentioned Adrian Martinez. Do you think that he, tying himself to a quarterback like Adrian Martinez, who always seemed to be, and you described it best, a turnover machine, and always seemed to make these turnovers at the most critical times? Do you think it was probably what mixture of the two that probably cost them a lot of those close games, Mark? Or do you put a lot of it on for us in-game decision making?
Well, it would have been interesting to have seen Adrian Martinez with a full season at Kansas State. He was having a good season in a more stable program with uh, better support, a more grounded program with mature players that are used to at least competing and winning. I'm not going to say that they were used to winning championships, but they did last season, versus having to carry the Nebraska offense more so than he did Kansas State with Deuce Vaughn. And again, with just complementary pieces that are guys that are Kansas State, the culture and the production and the maturity of the players, uh, going way back even to Bill Snyder, is pretty obvious, versus Nebraska just not being a poised football team, not being a team that makes the right plays, right decisions. And that's a reflection on the coach. So I don't think Scott Frost did Adrian Martinez many favors. He didn't develop him.
Right. Yeah. That's the other interesting thing with Rule is I think that Rule can have success there. I don't know if it'll be early on. Are you thinking that he can? I mean, I know you said that the turnaround's been pretty quick with him. I'm wondering where's the Nebraska win total at? I haven't seen it, Mark.
That there's not much gap between Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, if you want to throw them in there, even after just one competitive season, and Nebraska. All you have to do is watch the games year to year. It's not a Big Ten Eastern situation. It's not Ohio State bludgeons everyone and now Michigan has joined them, and
Hmm.
Penn State to a lesser degree. It's just every game's a free for all and every game's a toss up, and the Iowas and formerly the Wisconsins know how to win and not make mistakes, and Nebraska just like clockwork under Scott Frost made mistakes that led to losses, but they were in every game.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows if you have the right quarterback or a coach that doesn't screw it up in those games. Maybe you get a few more wins. You got to think that 7 wins is doable. At least 6 in a bowl game would be. But I
Yeah,
haven't
I
gotten a
think
chance to view that schedule, so I'm
I,
not.
I'm
I'm
pulling it up right now, and I think that should be the basic expectation or goal. And not to get to a bowl game, I believe every since Kansas made a bowl game this past year, every school in the Power Five has made a bowl game since Nebraska last made a bowl game.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, there's some wins in there. I mean, Louisiana Tech. I mean, that's doable. At Colorado is going to be really interesting.
mhm.
At Minnesota is going to be very interesting. Um, we'll see about at Illinois. I don't know if Brett's going to have quite as good a team as he had last year.
No, I don't see it.
I got to think that there's going to be a little bit of a decline there from last year. Yeah, that early schedule slate. I mean, you got to think, can they NIU, Louisiana Tech? You got to be able to get those.
Well,
You would,
certainly. So if they host Michigan and they're 3-1, that's about where I would expect them.
yeah,
That would be a good start,
yeah,
but not a unreachable start. They could be 4-0,
yeah.
but you would expect that they would slip up somewhere. Uh, but then they lose to Michigan. Then they've got a toss up at Illinois. And again, right out of the gate, they play a game that's going to be under some spotlight because the last 2 years they played a week 0 game. So they were the only, them and their opponent, Illinois, Northwestern, were the only big time teams playing in a week 0 game against each other. So they kind of had the spotlight and they opened the season in a very disappointing fashion. And it's like, oh, here we go again. And now they play a Thursday night game. I believe that's going to be a Fox game at Minnesota. So that's going to be like one of 2 games that's going to be on everyone's radar on opening night.
I think those first two are going to tell a big tale, Mark. Can they go 1-1 at least in the first two?
Yeah, they're both on the road.
Yeah.
Now, if Scott Frost was coaching, I'd say they're going to lose both of those games by a field goal. But
He'll find a way in the
they'll
last
find a
minute
way.
or two. Or Adrian Martinez was the quarterback. He would find a way to throw a pick or have a fumble or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, this Colorado team, boy, are they a wild card.
Yeah. The Deion Sanders era begins.
They have to beat Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, and Northwestern. Those
Yeah.
should be 3 automatic wins. And then, these games are just after Northwestern.
Yeah.
Look at those
Purdue's
last 5 games.
doable.
Those are all
Yeah.
toss ups.
Yeah.
They are just toss ups.
I think 6-6 is really doable. So if it's
Yep.
5.5, I'd be leaning towards taking that.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily take it, but if I had to, I'm going the over. If it's 5.5, that's what I remember it being.
Yeah, I'm a lean on that one at 5.5. Hey, Mark, I wanted to get to before I let you go the other team that we were going to talk about, the Wisconsin, real quick. I mean, obviously, I think Luke is a great hire. Little surprised. Well, he wasn't going to wait on a certain job for forever, But although, hopefully that's, longer than, but I'm not going to go there now. Uh, I'm sure the fans of the team up north will probably get a chuckle out of that one. But um, what are your long-term feelings of Luke at Wisconsin? The fit seems to be a pretty good one. Um, Obviously, we know how Wisconsin's been really good on that side of the division. Um, I did think the Christ era was kind of trending down a little bit for them over the last couple years here, so I'm not necessarily surprised that they moved on from Paul Christ. But just what are your feelings about him? Maybe more long term there, Mark. I know he's done some work in the transfer portal here in the off season, but I'm not only asking this question more short term, but more long term.
Yeah.
And do you think he can get them to a higher level than they've been? Let's say even than they saw in the Bielma era or even the Alvarez era, dare I say?
So Luke Fickle is a shot in the arm. He's a guy that has credibility. I think he brings credibility that is going to pay dividends both in the locker room and on the recruiting trail. That he's a recognizable name, college football playoff, star player. He's been around the game at high profile programs, Ohio State, of course. And then, the job he did at Cincinnati. So I think the credibility factor is huge, and he's still young and full of energy. He's still on an upward trajectory. He did great things at Cincinnati. He just checks all the boxes. I think he's a great hire. I think he's the best possible hire they could have made. He knows the Big Ten. He played in the Big Ten. He comes to Wisconsin. Barry Alvarez had enough respect for Luke Fickle to kind of get out of the way and say, well, we're going to let you run this program the way that you want to in terms of your on the field approach. And so how much he can turn over the offense and make it kind of a high flying offense that appears as that's what they're telling us they're going to do with Phil Longo coming in from North Carolina, but how much they can take the existing players and roster and everything that they were doing previously and make this more of a throw it 40 times and not 18
Yeah,
could be difficult the first year. May
yeah,
not
because
take hold.
yeah, Marcus, didn't it always seem like the same playbook that Brett Bielema had, or that Barry Alvarez had, was passed on to Brett Bielema, was passed on to was it? I'm sorry,
Gary Anderson.
Gary Anderson. Pardon me. Yeah, and then passed on to Paul Chris. They all just kept the same playbook. They kept the same players. You get big offensive linemen. You find one or two good backs, maybe a decent pass catching tight end. You throw the ball 15 to 18 times, like you said, and you try to win some 21-17 football. You know.
Absolutely. Once Barry Alvarez established this program, it stayed in the same mold that entire time. And it was getting a little stale, a little stagnant. I've got respect for Paul Christ. I think he's a very capable coach. I think he would be a great hire at somewhere like Missouri next. But if Wisconsin wants to play at a high level, they made the kind of decision that you make when you say, okay, we're stagnant and slightly trending down. We're going into a new era of college football. There's an expanded playoff. We have two potential powerhouses, or at least one entering the league. We've got to, and we've got a safe hire here. It's not like we're going for broke. Like this is a
Right.
crazy hire. We've got a safe home run hire. Let's go for it.
Yeah. I'm interested to see it big picture there, Mark. And also if they'll give him the resources, facilities, recruiting budget, NIL, all those things, prerequisites he's going to need to succeed there long term. I don't know if you've talked to any Wisconsin people or, what their feelings are on that thing, long term as far as that goes, or what your thoughts are.
Well, if the conference was not changing, I would be more hopeful for big things.
Mhm.
Certainly before the division split, or right when the division split and the conference was reformatted roughly 10 years ago and Urban Meyer entered, of course, Wisconsin was as strong as anybody in the conference.
Yeah.
just about as strong as Ohio State at the end of Jim Tressel's
Yeah.
tenure. So there's a capability to do it there. But now with USC,
Yeah.
UCLA, with no divisions, if it was going to stay this way, I'd say they're my bet to dominate's a strong word, but be the best program in that division going forward, which I always think of them being the best program in that division.
Yeah.
And actually, I made a side-by-side comparison, and I posted this on the Iowa channel a few weeks ago. I made a side-by-side comparison during the Kirk Ferentz era
Yeah.
of Wisconsin and Iowa, and Wisconsin's got a substantial lead in any measurable. They've been the better program over Iowa, and that's going back 20 years, and Iowa would be the next closest thing. So Wisconsin has been the best program, just
Hmm.
not recently, but I would have thought if we're going forward with the Big Ten as it is, that they're going to own that division. But now, with only the two top seeds most likely playing for a championship, and USC comes in and UCLA comes in, and more balanced scheduling, they're not going to just be, it's not going to all be Iowa, Minnesota, Northwestern packed schedule with whoever they have to face in the East. No, it's going to be more of a balanced schedule. That doesn't bode well. They made the move that they needed to make, I
Sure.
believe, to
The right move.
compete under these conditions, but the
Hmm.
conditions are not favorable compared to how favorable they were for Paul Chryst and Brett Bielema and Gary Anderson.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about, it's going to be a different Big Ten conference come 2024, and it's going to be a different college football world altogether.